I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Numbers, chapter 11, and let's focus on verses 4 through 6. The mixed multitude among them had a craving for other food. The Israelites cried again and said, "Who will feed us meat? We remember the free fish we ate in Egypt, along with the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and garlic. But now our appetite is gone, and there's nothing to look at but this manna." Numbers chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. Well, I'll remind you of the words of Don Henley's song, Boys of Summer. Out on the road today, I saw a Deadhead sticker on a Cadillac. A little voice inside my head said, "Don't look back. You can never look back." 1 year after their miraculous deliverance, the Israelites were starting to yearn for dear old Egypt. In some ways, they were not unlike the Grateful Dead fan in Don Henley's song. He wanted his free-spirited hippie youth without forfeiting his yuppie Cadillac. Israel wanted both. They wanted their freedom, and they wanted the benefits of Egypt. They chose to remember the positive aspects of Egypt, somehow forgetting that whole slavery thing. God's response, "You can't have your manna in Egypt too." Well, at least it was funny to me. To be fair to Egypt, it wasn't the whole nation who was grumbling, at least at first. It all started with what the Bible calls the mixed multitude. These were the foreigners who came out of Egypt along with the Israelites. And most of them had no enduring relationship with God, and yet they had benefited from Israel's blessed deliverance. And as we learned at the end of chapter 10, there is a shared blessing for any Gentile who partners with Israel. On Mount Sinai, God gave the same directions for both Israelites and for foreigners living among them to worship Him. He's not just the God of the Jews, He's the God of the whole earth. And if the foreigner disobeyed, well, then he was to be put out of the community, or literally put to death. The same as if a Jewish person disobeyed. Apparently, God's miracles were too soon forgotten. Hunger always determines the behavior of the ungodly. And pretty soon, many in the mixed multitude complained about God's rules, about holiness, and then they shucked all the kosher laws for some unclean dinner. Those Israelites close to them disobeyed as well. In American culture, being separate unto God is not honored, even among many who profess to be believers. It never surprises me when followers of Jesus choose to live on the border of the church and the world. And then they fall into moral disrepair, and their demise is foretold in numerous biblical accounts, such as today's chapter. It always seems like a surprise to them when they're living on the edge of the world and the church and like, "Oh, what happened to me? What happened? God has left me." No, you've left the Lord. You started living like the world and not living as He called you to be. Our greatest strength is found when we are closest to that section of God's people who seek the Lord without abandon. And when that section moves out to impact the world, well, it's harder for the enemy to pick them off because they move out as a group and not as individuals. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.